In about 4 weeks, I leave Arizona for a 2-month trip to the East Coast and Boston. Last weekend at camp, a couple of my friends were asking me how I plan for such a large trip. So this video is about planning, not packing. When planning a trip, there are some questions you have to ask yourself. The first question I asked myself on this trip is, why am I going and why am I choosing to go to New England and Boston this summer? Well, the reason is Grace, my wonderful daughter, is a park ranger at the Charlestown Navy Yard that houses the Castle Young and the USS Constitution. And she also works at the Bunker Hill Monument. So I am excited to see her in Boston. And who will I be traveling with? Well, across the country and most of the time I will be alone. When I get to Boston, obviously Gracie will be there. And then James is flying in September, and he's gonna spend 10 days with Grace and I in Boston and around Boston. And then after he leaves, my folks are flying in because they're so proud of Grace as a park ranger. My parents are older, they have serious mobility issues. So it will be an interesting adventure, pain in the rear, I don't know, to help them get around Boston and see Grace on the cobblestone streets in a walking city where they struggle to walk. I know my parents don't have a lot longer to live because of course they're older, and I want them to be able to see Grace and enjoy the rest of their lives. So when planning a trip, the biggest lesson I have learned is you leave room for the unexpected. The first major overlanding we took was 11 years ago. We drove our Range Rover Classic down through Guatemala, Belize, and Mexico, obviously. And so on that trip, we just had a loose plan and we decided each day where we were gonna go the next night. And that's pretty much how I travel most of the time. And we found some extraordinary things down there. There were several Mayan ruins that we didn't even know about before we started the journey, but somebody said, oh, you should go visit this one. And one was Yasha, which we really loved in Guatemala, which I thought was better than Tikal, mainly because there were not so many people there. Another thing, leaving room for the unexpected. When Grace turned 16 years old, one of my friends told me I should take her on a road trip. Well, and since I've never been quite normal, I decided let's go on a 6,000-mile journey to Alaska and drive the Alaska Highway. So we did when Grace was 16 years old. We were supposed to take our 1968 Doormobile, but it decided at the last minute, with a huge oil leak that we couldn't figure out, it wasn't going to go. So we packed all of our stuff into the Nissan Versa and crammed it all in there, and we drove to Alaska. And it was not the adventure we were expecting, but it was a great adventure. Another lesson I've learned is sometimes you just have to give up and go to a hotel. We were down on the Baja Peninsula for Christmas and a windstorm swept through, and our tent, one stake held, so the whole side of the tent ripped, and we went back up to Mexicali and went to Walmart and we looked at the $25 cheapy tent they sell, and we looked at the $12 3M duct tape, and we chose the 3M duct tape, and we duct taped up the whole side of the tent. But there's a lot of scorpions in Mexico, and I still wasn't comfortable, and the wind kept blowing. So the day after Christmas, I booked us into the Omni in San Diego, and we had our holy shoes and our old clothes because we had planned it on being in Baja, and we had our old Range Rover Classic, which they said they thought was the most organized of anything, and we spent the entire rest of our budget at the Omnia, and then we went home early. Sometimes you just have to pivot. When you overland, you need to think about what you can control and what you cannot control. And you only need to worry about, in the planning process, the things that you can control. The things you can control: vehicle maintenance. You can control what you bring. You can control when you make reservations. What you can't control: you can't control the weather. You can't control if something happens on the trail and your car breaks. You can't control flat tires. And of course, I can't control my parents. Mom, book your reservations. I'd ask you to put it down in the comments and let me know, what is the lesson you have learned most about overland travel? So let's talk about my timeline. I have been thinking for about 6 months I need a different kitchen setup in my Defender. And so I have been thinking about that for a while now, and I finally built that kitchen. Next week's video is all about rearranging my kitchen to make it more suitable for the Defender and more suitable for the way I travel in the Defender. What am I thinking about with the Defender 4 weeks out from a major trip? I'm thinking about maintenance that I need to do. Diff fluid I'm going to buy, and transmission fluid from the dealer on Monday, and I will be changing those out this week. I'm also making an appointment, because I hate this job, is my brake fluid needs to be flushed out. And in a newer vehicle, it's hard, and you need the gap tool to do it and to bleed the brakes properly. And Grace has our gap tool in Boston, so I'm gonna take it into a shop and get that done, because brake fluid's so nasty. I think about when I went to Mexico, our tires had about 10,000 miles left on them, and so we waited, and then we had a flat deep in Mexico. Well, it is really hard to find a good quality tire in Mexico, so that was a mistake. But we just changed these tires a few months ago, so they're ready to go, but I'm gonna go get them balanced and rotated before this trip. Also at this time, I'm starting to think about my route. I'm starting to plan out how I'm gonna get to Boston, because I can go any way I want. So I'm working on that. The other thing is what reservations? I'm not a reservation person. So what reservations do I really need to make right now? So James has booked his flights into Boston, yay. So we know those dates. And then I booked us in, because I can't afford hotels in Massachusetts or in Boston for the whole time. I booked us into a campground right on the coast in Salem, Massachusetts for 6 nights while he's there. Then we will fill in with Airbnbs or hotels based on what happens between now and then. Now, for the part that my parents are coming, they've booked nothing. And this is totally out of my control. As soon as they book it, I'm booking an Airbnb so that we can do that. But I can't book an Airbnb until they give me their flight information. So, Mom, if you're watching, don't procrastinate and book the flights. My mom doesn't watch my videos, so it'll be really funny if she ever does, and see how she comments. So 3 weeks ahead of time, my plan is to start thinking about what clothing I need, what gear I'm gonna take, and anything that I need to fill in. Because I think I'm gonna be in some campgrounds and I'll have a picnic table, I wanna buy a tablecloth, because, picnic tables are gross in campgrounds. And there's a few other things I'm still debating on what I'm gonna bring, and so I'm still thinking about that, if I need to buy any clothes to fill in with. So I'm starting to do that. At 2 weeks out, I'm gonna try and fit everything in this car that I wanna bring. And I have a packing philosophy, and I will be sharing that in a few weeks, my packing video of actually putting this stuff in the car, what I'm bringing, and why I'm bringing it. And then 1 week before, obviously, I make sure all my batteries are charged, I go to the grocery store, I buy anything else, and I do those last minute preparations. The day before, I'll go buy some ice, load the fridge, and be ready to head out of town. So, I have a question. For those of you that are overlanders and have done these long trips, or even just a week-long trip is a long trip in a vehicle, what do you wish you knew before you went that might be helpful advice for me on this trip? Leave it down in the comments, and I can't wait to hear what advice you have for me to make this trip one of my best adventures ever. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it, and it really helps. Thank you. See you next week, and we'll talk about my new camp kitchen.